Greetings and welcome to today's painting lesson. What else do we do here? Why was that confusing? Anyways, today we're painting this lesson right here. It is a cut-up of an hour-long lesson available over on Patreon, but along with the usual information of you can get all of these hour-long lessons and digital sketches up on Patreon, I thought I'd also mention in this video at the start here all of the materials we're using. Now, generally they're listed in the description box down below, but today I thought we'd go over it quickly just so you could see everything and know exactly what we're using. Then we'll start the painting lesson. So, let's jump into it. My preferred brand of paint is Liquitex Basics. I use primary red, primary yellow, primary blue, burnt umber, Mars black, and titanium white. I'm using a 7x9 canvas board. I got this at the dollar store. I use a glass palette because it's easy to clean with a wall scraper. I also use a small dish of water and a cloth to wipe my excess paint on. Now let's talk about brushes. I use a small, medium, and large square-headed brush from Artist Loft. I like to use a small and medium-sized round-headed brush, also from Artist Loft. And then I have an older square-headed brush. This is one you can make very simply by just peeling back the bristles on your brush until you get something that looks a little disheveled. I generally like to use a square-headed brush for this sort of thing. Anyways, I hope that was helpful. As per usual, you can get the full hour-long lesson over on Patreon along with 30 others, as well as digital sketches and royalty-free reference photos. So if any of that interests you, check it out and also check out the book sale, link in the description. That's enough rambling on my part. Let's jump into the video. Now, I'm going to begin here today with the large square-headed brush. I'm going to dip just the tip of it in water. This will help me extend the wet life of my paint, help me drag it farther, and keep the bristles together. Then I'm going to grab some titanium white paint and apply it to the entirety of the open sky. So I'm not going to go over the clouds too much here. The goal is just to cover all of that open space. So there I have my sky. It is completely covered in white, and now I can add some color to it. So here I'm going to grab some titanium white, grab a little bit of primary blue with the corner of my brush, mix those together as you can see here. I'm going to take that to the top of my sky, and then I'm going to blend downwards as you can see. Now the goal here is to create a bit of a gradient, so I want it to be brighter down here and more blue and slightly darker up here. Now I'm going to switch over to a new brush. This is going to be the smaller round-headed brush. I like this brush a lot for creating softer edges, for things like clouds and light, mist, that sort of thing. So I'm going to take some titanium white and move that down on my palette, grab a little bit of this water, mix it in so that it spreads really smoothly and we can blend it over this now semi-dry layer. Then I'm going to go to my sun. I'm going to apply it in a circular motion and blend this new brighter pigment outwards. This is going to give the sun a really nice bright glow to it. I'm now going to take this smaller round-headed brush and we're going to continue using this for just a little while. I'm going to create a blue that's similar to that, but I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'll use a tiny bit more blue in this mixture than I did the last one, and I'm mixing it on my palette right next to that color so that I know exactly what the last color looks like in relation to the new color, so I'll know what they'll look like beside each other on the canvas. Now that's good, I like it a lot, but I want these clouds to be slightly purple. So I'm going to grab some red and mix that in there. Red and blue together mixed to make a purple. So it's really quite easy. Here we're just using our primary red, turning that about, and we'll try that on the canvas now. Just like this. Looks quite nice. Let's try a little bit more. And now I'm going to brighten it up. It's all about changing things slightly, testing them until you get exactly what you want. Oh, and that's pretty. I like that a lot. As I come out to the edge here, I'm applying less and less pressure. That way, less bristles expand, and I can just touch the canvas with the edge of my brush. Now I'm going to begin working on the clouds that are a little bit more in the foreground, and we're going to do that with a bit of a darker color. So I'm going to mix more of that purple, but I'm going to use less titanium white in this mixture here. Now primary blue is a slightly stronger color than primary red, so we're going to have to use a bit more primary red than blue. But then we'll just go back in, start by working on the edges of the clouds, as we've done before. As I get towards the smaller parts of the clouds, I'm applying much less pressure with my brush. That way my application is soft. So I'm going to switch over to my medium-sized square-headed brush because we're going to be working with some sharper edges. Starting by making the tip of it a little bit damp, grabbing some Mars Black for the first time, grabbing some titanium white, grabbing some primary blue, about double that of primary red, mixing them all together and getting a nice purple. I'm going to grab a little bit more blue and work on that. This is essentially going to be the first test color for my mountains, as you can see here. Now generally I'd work on these mountains because they're farther away, but the color that I mixed here was a little bit darker and I thought it would suit the foreground a little bit better. So I figure I'll try throwing that in first. For these mountains, I'm going to take more titanium white, mix that in here, take a little bit of primary red, a little bit of primary blue, and now using the sharp edge, I'm going to draw in my mountains, working on the edges just like we did with the clouds, and then moving my way inwards, as you can see here. It almost gets lost in the clouds, which is a really nice effect. I like that a lot. Now I'm going to take that color that we just had and I'm going to use it for the tops of the mountains that we have in the foreground. Not all of them, just the areas at the top that are receiving the most light. And the bottoms are going to be darker, like this color here. So now I'm going to jump back into this painting with the smaller square-headed brush. This will be great because it'll allow me to get those nice sharp edges while still covering a good amount of space. Now I'm taking some titanium white here and I'm mixing it in with the darker pigment that we were just applying. That way we have a nice highlight color, which I'm going to apply to the edges of the mountains which are facing the sun. This is just going to create a little bit more depth, as you can see. Nice and easy, with a similar cohesive color palette. And you can work this color back into the mountains a little bit as well. Just need to make sure that it's slightly brighter than the other pigment. We're going to move to the water here, where I'm going to grab my medium-sized square-headed brush. I'm going to dip the tip of it in some water, grab some of our primary blue, move it down into this new area right here, grab some titanium white, and a little bit of Mars Black. That's to desaturate it. We're still not in the foreground, and it's also going to thicken our paint a little bit too. So there I have a relatively light blue, and I'm going to start by applying that to the entirety of our water. Here you can paint over the posts, as you can see. You can paint over the sand, that's okay, we'll be painting those in later. I am trying to ensure that my strokes are all horizontal. So now we have our base layer, which is great, but we need to do a lot more with that. We need to create depth with it. So now I'm going to take some additional titanium white and throw a lot of it into our mixture. So the sun is reflecting down here. This is where it's going to be the brightest. I'm taking this brighter pigment and then I'm blending it from the middle out on either side. I'm going to use the smaller, sharper edge of my brush to create some detail work, as you can see. And as I get towards the edge, I'm relieving pressure with my brush, allowing the application to get a little bit sharper. Going back to my palette, grabbing some more titanium white, yet again brightening this mixture. So now you see the first mixture, the second, the third, and the fourth. This one looks much brighter, which is nice. We're finally getting to that truly bright pigment. Try to keep your lines fairly straight. We're not going out as far as we did with the last layer. Every time we do a new layer, we're moving it in slightly more. That way we get a gradient from dark to light with the edges. I'm now going to jump back into this painting with my smaller square-headed brush, grab a little bit of titanium white paint, a hint, just a hint of primary blue, mix up something brighter than what we've used before, and yet again begin to apply that in the middle of our water. Here I'm using a little Z-shaped pattern, give us a little bit of a wave look to it. And I'm just expanding as I get a little bit closer to us, as perspective will make it look smaller as it fades into the distance. Now I'm going to take my medium-sized square-headed brush, make sure that it's nice and damp, grab some of that burnt umber, a little bit of Mars black, and a little bit of titanium white. Burnt umber is a fairly thin pigment, so we need to thicken it just a little bit, and it's also going to desaturate it, which is nice. We don't want the brown in our painting to be the most saturated. Then I'm going to grab a little bit of primary yellow, primary red, mix those two together, make a nice orange, and blend that in with our burnt umber so we get this really beautiful brown. Now from there, I'm going to start applying that to our beach, as you can see here. Going to have it work its way up on both the left and the right hand sides. And that's a good start. Just like that. Though I do want this to be full of depth. I don't want it to be flat. We have a flat layer right there. We have a single pigment, so let's brighten it up. Let's grab some titanium white. Let's throw that in there. And now let's add that to the foreground. And then kind of work it back, create a couple little pieces of sand that are kind of higher up and catching a little bit more light. I'm going to take some titanium white, pure titanium white, with my damp brush, and I'm going to run this between my water and my sand. There we are. Going to take a little bit of blue, just a little bit, some titanium white, mix those together, and I'm going to place this over a little bit of my sand. Now I'm going to take my medium-sized square-headed brush, make sure that it's nice and damp, grab some titanium white, move that to a clean part of my palette here, grab just a corner bit of Mars black and mix up a gray. It's still a light gray, but it is nonetheless a gray. And I'm going to apply this to the poles here, a nice little fence, with the sharp edge of this brush. So I'm just starting this with what I thought would be the dark layer of my pole, and then I build highlights on top of it. But I think it's a little bit too bright. I'm going to be making these white fences here, but they need darker color in them, or at least darker value in them, to work, to have depth. Now I'm going to take more of that Mars black and titanium white, and I'm going to connect them. So I have all of these little interlocking pieces. And I'm just going to put in this darker base layer for all of them as well. I'm going to take my smaller square-headed brush, grab some titanium white paint, and then begin applying it to the edges with a little bit of a tapping motion that are going to be receiving the most light. So on this post right here, this is the edge that is closest to the sun, as well as the top of the post, which is going to be receiving a lot of light. So I'm painting in a little bit of an oval there. Over here, yet again the top is going to be receiving a lot of light, but this edge is going to be the one that is brightest. So I'm going to continue that tapping motion over here. Now I'm going to take that smaller square-headed brush, grab some Mars black, hint of titanium white, make a very dark gray. I'm just going to place in all of the rocks that we have sketched out on our canvas. I'm going to switch over to my medium-sized square-headed brush, grab a good amount of water, grab some primary yellow for the first time in this lesson, some primary blue, about only half the primary blue that we used primary yellow, because the primary blue is a much stronger pigment and will quickly take it over. I'm going to mix a green with those two, and I'm going to add some titanium white, some Mars black. This is going to desaturate it, it's going to thicken it, and right now we just want a dark base color for our grass. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of our primary yellow, our Mars black, until I get something just like this. From there, I'm going to apply that to all of the white that we have allocated here for our grass. But now with this small brush, I'm going to take it and I'm just going to add in some highlights. Now, as you can see, it's very saturated in comparison to the rest, so we do want to desaturate it a little bit. We'll grab some titanium white. It's going to brighten the pigment and it's going to desaturate it. Now we'll give this a shot. And I'm just going to have this grass kind of flowing. Instead of sticking upwards, it's kind of leaning downwards. And I want it to have a little bit more desaturation, so I'll mix some Mars black in there. Brighten it up again. Primary yellow, titanium white. And now we'll try this. And that's a real highlight right there. So I'm going to clean off my brush a little bit. I like this pigment, I like it a lot. Just going to take this and throw in all of these little strands. Now we are cleaning our brush, and this is kind of a last minute decision. But looking at it, I really like the painting right now. That's essentially what we initially had, but I think we can do more with it. I love the purple in the sky. I want to incorporate that down into the grass as well. So I'm going to take this smaller brush here. I'm going to make more of that dark purple. So I'm going back to my palette where I mixed the initial purple. I'm going to make some more right there. I'm going to grab a little bit of Mars black to darken it. And then I'm going to create some flowers here in the foreground that kind of move the viewer's eye in towards the painting. Now I'm going to clean my brush quite well. I'm going to go back to my palette, grab some primary red, some of our blue, mix it up with some titanium white. This is going to thicken the pigment and give us a nice bright purple, which we can now apply to our flowers. And I'm kind of doing this on the highlights of all of the petals that I think are going to be receiving light. So I'm leaving darker areas, but I'm tapping on all of these little highlights here. Now, let's talk about complementary colors. I have a video on my channel called How to Mix Every Color. It essentially explains the color wheel. It talks about complementary colors. Red and green are complementary colors. They're opposites. If you blend them together, they make a gray. And they are the colors for Christmas. Other complementary colors include orange and blue. They make each other pop really, really well. Other complementary colors are purple and yellow. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add some little yellow flowers in here just to kind of pop with all of the purple in our painting. So I'm going to take my smaller round-headed brush. I'm going to take some primary yellow. I'm going to find some fairly clean titanium white. Might be hard to find at this point. And I'm going to tap on just a couple pretty little flowers in here. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative. As an update, Howie is still fast asleep.